Hi, I'm Akin Babatundé. I'm an actor, director, writer, lecturer, coach, mentor, and most of all, I am an artist. Oh, and my age, I'm in my late 60s.
That is wonderful. I'm so glad that you decided to take a moment or two. I say a moment or two to sit down and talk with me today, Akin. I'm obviously such a huge fan, and
Thank you.
yeah, absolutely. I would imagine that most people who work with you think of their careers in terms of BA and AA, before Akin and after Akin. Because it's transformative, brother. You go to work, working with you, and you're gonna go, oh, we working on a different level now. We're gonna come at it from a different place, and so I'm grateful to have had that experience.
What a lovely compliment. I appreciate that, and I think it's rather true. You know, I just finished directing a play before the pandemic called Abyssinia at the Majestic Theater here in Dallas. And this play has been trying to get to a commercial success for many years. Hopefully, it will happen next year. They're very interested in moving it. But a lot of the actors had said, and there were some actors who had done it before, about a couple of years ago, 5 years ago, and they said, this is a different play. And it's nothing like what I thought it would be.
Right.
And a lot of the actors were like, I know what I'm doing, but then when I work with you, I have to question that because I have to go deeper.
Right.
And I find that very warning. And some people fight back on that. Sure. And some people transform and grow, like you said. I've had many actors who are on Broadway who I've worked with. Some I've coached on TV shows now. And I'm just grateful for how I grew up in the theater.
Right.
Because I grew up under the Black arts movement, but I grew up under some people who were very, very, very ensconced in the craft and the connection to the craft. And the reason you say what you say, and not be performative or a performer, but be an activist who changes the world, who gives you an opportunity to look at life and transform it through the theater.
Right.
And I'll never forget that. I had great mentors. Barbara Ann Tier from the National Black Theater. I had Ellen Stewart, my
right.
I'm gonna cry when I think of Ellen.
La Mama, baby.
La Mama. And all of these happened very strange, especially at La Mama. I was doing a play called The Secret Place that Garrett Morris wrote and Bill Duke directed, me and my brother Oba Babatunde. And you may know that name. He's a well-known and celebrated Emmy Award-winning actor. We started off in the off-Broadway Black arts movement. And Ellen would come down and see my performance every night. And there was an actor in there. His name was Harvey Fierstein. You know Harvey Fierstein?
I do.
Like this. And Harvey said, Ellen wants to see you, baby. And I said, what are you talking about, Harvey? We used to love going to Harvey's dressing room, and he would do Marlita Dietrich. He said, like voodoo, like boom, 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 boom. And we just kids laughing in the presence of him like he was our big brother. And he said, Ellen wants to see you. And I said, okay. He says, you're a La Mama baby. I said, what the fuck is a La Mama baby? And when I saw her and met her, I went up to her room, which was in her apartment, which was in the theater. And she says, there are many people who come into our world, Mr. Babatunde. And you're a genius, an unsung genius who was in our world. And you were part of the La Mama Company. And she put me in the La Mama Company.
Wow. Wow. On the spot.
Yeah. Yeah, I did so many things. She touched my first play I wrote. Whew.
Wow.
She put a hand on it. And she said, this will open the 1978 La Mama season. And it did.
Yeah, it
The
did.
play was What Is. And that play, in that audience was George Houston Bass, who was the executor of the Langston Hughes estate. He was very close to Langston Hughes. As a matter of fact, the ashes of Langston Hughes sat in his office before they went to the Schomburg. And George said, you have to come to my theater, Rights and Reasons Theater at Brown University, and be an artist in residence. So I went to Ellen and I said, oh, George invited me to work at Brown University as an artist in residence in Africa. She said, baby, you are under contract at the Mama, and Mama ain't letting you go nowhere this season. But she thought about it. And she let me out of one of the shows and let me be an artist in residence there. And I was there for 8 years. And from there, I met the great Adrian Hall, who was another one of my mentors. And Adrian brought me to Dallas Theater because I always wanted to be a part of Trinity Rep in Providence, Rhode Island. And I got an opportunity to do that because one of the actors, his father had died. And Marion Simon, all of these names are starting to make me cry.
That's all right. That's what we're here for. That's the journey, brother.
And Marion Simon said, baby, we have enough people in our company, you know, so I don't know. And I accepted that. But every year while I was at Brown University, I would go to Marion, who was his right-hand man. Mm-hmm. And one day she says, baby, she called me in New York. How quick can you get up here? I said, why? She said, because one of our actors were doing Master Harold and the Boys, and one of the actors, his father died, and we need a replacement. Do you know the play? I didn't know the play. I said, yes. I jumped on that train, learned that role, and I had 2 days to rehearse it. And I went in, and the reviews, the Providence Journal says, last minute replacement gives stellar performance.
And I'm guessing you played Sam.
No, I played.
You played Willie. Okay, you played Willie. You were much younger then.
Yes, I was much younger then.
Yes, okay.
And Adrian heard about it, and Adrian invited me to his house. And the way you got to know Adrian, he would invite you to his house, and you'd have some tea and a pound cake. And that was my initiation knowing Adrian. Wow. And he said, baby, we do not have anything in the company right now, but I love what you did with the play. And you will work with us. And every now and then I'd call, and finally I got in the company, and I was so happy to be in that Tony Award-winning company. And then all of a sudden, Adrian became the artistic director of Dallas Theater Center. And he said, darling, I need you to do the favor for me. And I said, what? He says, come to Dallas and do the Boys Next Door. And I said, Adrian, I'm getting ready to do Joe Turner's Come and Go. I thought to do that. He said, do daddy a favor. So I went to Marion Simon and I said, Marion, I don't want to leave home. She said, darling, you go and you spread your wings. You can always come back here, but you go and you spread your wings. And I came to Dallas kicking and screaming. And I don't want to go to the place that killed Kennedy. It was horrible, that thing that I said, you know, the North and that kind of thing. And I ended up joining that company, and it was divine. I love being a member of that company. And as a result of being a member of that company, I was able to provide opportunities for African-American artists to be seen on a more visible and professional level. As a matter of fact, I created Dallas's first professional acting company called Vivid Theater Ensemble. And though that's my journey from all of my great mentors, and Adrian is still alive. And I went to visit him last year, and it was like seeing your grandpa, you know, and he's suffering from dementia, but he remembered. And he started showing me pictures of when I was in the company and all of that. And I was just visibly moved.
Well, here's the thing. When I reached out to you and said, okay, I want you to do this interview, and you said yes, and I get nervous, and I'm like, okay, this is actually going to happen. So now we've got to sit down and try to map out in what is typically an hour video series, this rich story. And so I want to start with this. I think that you are, to a lot of people, and you may not think this, but you may not know this, but I think to a lot of people, you're a bit of a theater superhero.
Oh, wow.
And like with every good superhero, I think the important thing is to start with the origin story.
Okay.
And, you're a kid from New York.
Brooklyn, New York. You hear it in my accent.
Absolutely.
I can't lose it, and I don't want to. When I first came down here, they used to say, you was a Yankee. I said, what the hell is a Yankee?
You're growing up, a train ride away from the epicenter of American theater.
Yes.
So I want to start here in your home, the environment that raised you, because so many of the people, the young artists who are listening to this, are coming from a variety of, supportive or non-supportive backgrounds. What was the home like that's reared Akin Babatundé? Did it was it encouraging of the arts? How did you come into contact with it?
Well, I came into contact with it because I went to a junior high school in New York called Nathan Hill Junior High School. Mm-hmm. And with my age, I remember that. But, while you're walking through the hallways and going to class, I was distracted. I was distracted because I heard something going on in the auditorium. And I opened the doors of the auditorium, and lo and behold, they were rehearsing a play.
Right.
And the play was called Carousel. And I'll never forget that. They were singing, it was a real nice clown day. We had a real nice time. And it was as if the voice of God opened up and said, follow me. And I did. I followed that voice to the front of the theater, to the sacred space called the stage. Mm-hmm. And I asked the assistant principal, can I be in this play? And she looked at me like I was the ugliest, peasy-headed black boy you ever want to see. And she said, you will never be in the play. Mm-hmm. And I said, you're right, because everybody in the play was lighter than me. They were Hispanic or light-skinned black. And when I grew up at the time, there was this saying,
if you're light, you're all right. If you're yellow, you a good fellow. If you're brown, maybe you could stick around. But baby, if you're black, get back.
Right.
And baby, it was something I had embraced because my nickname was Black Cigar. Blackie. You stayed in the oven too long. And I used to embrace those things. They say, how you doing, Midnight? I said, I'm good. That was my nickname.
Because you and your brother are slightly different hues, but you're the darker of the two.
Right.
Right.
Right. And I could have let that go on in my system. And then when I went to high school, I went to a high school called the High School of Fashion Industries. So many people went there. Cindy Lauper, Antonio Fargas. It was a high school for the arts, but the apparel arts. But there were so many artists there. And when I went, I saw the voice of God happen again. I opened the auditorium. They were rehearsing a play called The Boyfriend. And that's what we call The Boyfriend. And I went to the front. Can I be in this play? And the answer was, we have what we need. Meaning we have our quota. And I interpreted it to say, yeah, you too dark. And that day I said, oh, I'll be in a play and you'll live to read about it, you know? And I went on to become work in the apparel industry. I wanted to be a designer, but I was a pattern maker at a place called Ashante Fashions, which was huge and was on Fifth Avenue in New York. And it was a huge, because African fashion was in at that time. And I cut the necks backwards. And the head designer said, I want you to leave. And I want you to go and do what you're called to do. Because you're not called to do this. And that's when I joined in the National Black Theater. And, you know.
Yeah, you'd had these two really clear signs. I always say that for every actor, there's a point of no return. There's some place where you hit a mark and you can't turn back from it. It's you're called or you're not. And you'd had two such experiences. Yes,
you are called. You know, when you asked about my family, my father was a policeman and a great leader. He helped create the organization called Noble, and I got a lot of leadership qualities from him. He recently died, Joseph Royal. And my mother, she was a homemaker, but she also took care of handicapped people. I grew up in the projects in Brooklyn, New York, Gowanus projects. But I say the projects are not in me in a negative way, because when I grew up during the projects, oh my God, we would leave. We had a milkman who would deliver milk. And then we would drink the milk and the orange juice, put the empty bottles in front of our door with money, and nobody would bother it. That's the environment that I grew up in. Everybody looked out for each other. But then drugs came into my community, gangs came into my community, and what saved me was the theater. And I grew up with a lot of women, the maternal support. I was the favorite. And my grandmother adored me. And my mother adored me. And my aunts adored me. Right. And, you know, I could do no wrong. You know, my cousins, when I would come around, they said, get him something to eat. They said, who the hell is he? And my grandma, he lives out of town or whatever. But they adored me, and they poured such spiritual love into my system and into my being. My mother didn't want me to be an actor. She wanted me to teach. Okay. And my brother was going to be a musician, you know. She wanted me to teach. I was the one who found the acting in my family at National Black Theater and brought my brother along. And it's a funny story because I used to always say, oh, you dance like Soupy Sales, because I was dancing then at the same time. Wow. And my brother ended up in Dreamgirls. Right. And opening night of Dreamgirls, I went backstage because I had a nickname for him. I called him Soupy Sales. And I went backstage, and every star in the universe was at the opening night of Dreamgirls. You cannot imagine what that was like. Wow. I sat next to Lauren Bacall at the party. My mentor was there, all kinds of people. And he looked at me and whispered in my ear, what you think of Soupy Sales now? And I just fell out. I said, oh my God, you were magnificent. But my family, my mother, she did not embrace it until she saw me on a soap opera. And then, oh, that's my son. You know, my brother Oba, you know, he was independent. They never gave him any trouble because he was an independent soul. And he's the one who got me to move out of my mother's home. Because he said, if you don't move, you never will move, because you'll be there under the wings of taking care of Mom. Right. So the women in my family I adore. My grandmother Allen, my grandmother Royal, my mother Bernice Royal, my aunts Pee Wee, Edna Stewart, Betty Blunt, Auntie Mildred Marshall. these were all people who just wrapped me in their arm like I was gold. And when my grandmother died, somebody whispered in my ear and said, you know, you were her diamond. So for those days that was called Black Cigar or Blackie or Midnight, they were the foundation of my spirituality and my support, by knowing that there was something unique and special about me. And that's what Ellen told me. She said, you unique, baby. And my mother went to see a play that I directed in Dallas. The first Black man to direct at the Shakespeare Festival.
Yeah.
And I did Taming of the Shrew with a multicultural cast, which was very innovative at that time. And my mother came. They brought her down for the reception. And she said, I never understood Shakespeare. She said, but I was sitting there on the edge of my seat. She says, I'm going to tell you something, baby. You, my son, and you are unique, but they're not going to give it to you. Don't look for everybody else to give it to you. You have to know you're unique. And then that was echoed, from Ellen.
Sure.
So I embraced that special gift that God has given me, which is to celebrate life through the art of theater.
Well, so we now know that we owe a little bit to the boyfriend. We owe a little bit to Rodgers and Hammerstein. Thank you, Carousel.
Yes.
And that
a little bit because growing up in New York, me and my brother used to sneak into theater, Broadway theater, and see. Like we must have saw the Wiz 50 times growing up.
Yeah.
But I also saw a musical called Mame with Angela Lansbury, and that left an indelible impression on me because I think I went to the musical, and then we would sneak in at halftime, to see shows.
Right. Just trying to get a glimpse of what that world looked like. Because if you could see it, even if you didn't necessarily see you up there, you could start to imagine a path toward it.
It was magical. It was heaven. It was where I belong. It was like God himself was present in the theater. And when I watched those performances and those performers, they were expressions, glorious expressions of God. And I'll never forget those iconic moments of sitting there watching Ain't Supposed to Die a Natural Death by Marion Van Peebles. A couple of times sneak it in. And some of the great people who came out of that. I'll never forget going off Broadway and seeing a lot of the iconic figures who came out of the Black arts movement at the Negro Ensemble Theatre Company. I'll never forget that. That's my era. My contemporaries are Denzel Washington and Sam Art Reyes. Those are the people I grew up in the theater with. Who would
and I mean, oh gosh, thankfully, you have a ton of stories, so I can usually just let you go and get into a place.
I'm sorry.
No, that's exactly what I want, because this is about the whole purpose of this idea was not only to connect us and our artists to an audience, but I think we need to give the information to our next generation of artists and let them not start from zero, but take these stories, take the history, and build their career, because they're going to be the ones who decide what theater is 20 years from now.
Yes.
As we're having to readjust to coronavirus and how people want to partake in this storytelling, but the need to share those stories will never die.
Yes.
It will never die. And I'm fascinated, and I want to follow your thread, because you had two significant early, and correct me if I'm wrong, if my research is not accurate, but you've got two really significant elements in your early development. When you decide, I'm going to pursue this, you work with the National Black Theater in Harlem.
Yes.
We're talking about roughly 4 decades of theater history.
More than that, 5 decades.
Yeah. And they're at the forefront of this new movement at the end of the 60s, at the end of the 70s, that says, not only are we going to show you experimental theaters, but we're going to show you experimental theater with people of color right out front. And we're going to be both unabashedly proud and dig into the painful stuff about our history. Wow. Like, okay, so playwrights are coming out of there developing this work. The Negro Ensemble Company is happening at the same time. And then there's this
the New Lafayette Theater.
That's right.
At the same time.
Yeah. So all of this is happening in this kind of supernova of the explosion of African-American expression through theater art. Yeah. And then, kind of in an odd continuation of it, now it doesn't seem so odd, but then it must have, because Ellen Stewart was not necessarily a theater artist when she began her work. Right. But she creates La Mama Experimental Theater Club.
Yeah, and it was called Cafe La Mama at the beginning because she was a designer.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. She's not an actor. But she sees the value in creating this thing. And I mean, for our audience who doesn't know, she lays this course, and the people that she gets to work there in the early years include Pacino. They're Harvey Fierstein. They're Robert De Niro. It's F. Murray Abraham, Olympia Dukakis.
Tom O'Hagan, who did hair. I got to do The Tempest with Tom O'Hagan.
Right.
As Caliban. These were all at La Mama. The great figure Divine. There's a figure she played a lot of
the early drag.
He was fabulous. He was a fan of mine. He would come and just watch my performances. And Ellen would say, Divine just loves you, darling. And when I went to see him in Women Behind Bars, I was like, what the fuck is going on? But he was fascinating. I met him one time. But I met all kinds of people. Andre Chaban came through there, through that world of La Mama. You're right.
And so eventually it would be Akin Babatundé who's working within the confines of this La Mama Experimental Theater, which is where that term La Mama Baby, those early influences in developing. But I'm going to be honest with you without blowing smoke. In this moment that you're talking about, you're literally creating the bridge that allows Tommy Davidson, that allows Sam Jackson, those early African Americans. You're literally creating the bridge that allows me to work in the American theater, because we weren't in it. We weren't part of that equation before La Mama.
Yeah.
And so I got to ask, what was the in that moment, in those specific moments, what were you all building? Obviously, you probably weren't thinking you're building a bridge to the future, but what were you building? What were you creating in terms of bringing our art to a larger, broader, I don't know if this is the right word, more atypical audience?
Well, throughout all of those experiences, one of the things that was embedded in me is you are a celebrator. You're a priestess of your emotions. You're Adrian Hall used to say, we belong to one of the oldest professions outside of prostitution in the world, the theater. And so there are thousands of souls who support us and whose foundation we stand on when we perform. So throughout then and even now, I am consistently creating the transformative power of theater, the power to feel and know that I'm making a difference in something that I absolutely love to do, that I'm changing lives, and my life is consistently being enriched. And even in those moments, because even people like Felicia Rashad, we knew her when she was in The Wiz, and me and my friend Elaine Graham, I have so many fabulous friends. Lilius White, Elaine Graham, Lilius is a Tony Award winner. Elaine was a soap opera actress. I remember the day that Elaine told Felicia Rashad that she was going to get the Cosby Show. She used to call her Becky. And he said, "Oh, Becky, you're going to get that part." And she ended up getting that role.
Right.
Because she had an interest in story. She but followed her passion for who she knew she was and quit Dreamgirls. She thought she was better than the chorus. And I remember stories like that. So we never were looking for the golden ring. We were so involved and in a foundation of art, of being an artist, and knowing that being an artist would sustain us.
Right.
And in the Bible, it says your gift will make room for you to sit in the presence of kings and queens.
Right.
And I'll never forget, I went to Austria, to Vienna, to direct a play called Black Girl Sings.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was called, they said, "Well, we want somebody with Broadway credits." He doesn't have Broadway credits. But the writer, Frank Higgins, said, "I want him." You know, he was the musical director on one of my productions, but I want him. And his agent said, if you don't take him, we're not giving you the rights to play. So I went.
And this was at the English Theater.
At the English Theater. And the first day I sat at the meet and greet, it was very intimidating. Because the wealth of the community of Vienna was in that meet and greet. And they were like, "Oh, really? Let's see what you could do." And after the first rehearsal, the artistic director came and she says, "We are in good hands, baby." And it is because of my craft. And I'll never forget opening night. Opening night was like something in a movie. The red carpet coming up in the limousine, the grandeur of Vienna. And at that party, they had a cake with my name on it, a cake with every actress's name on it, and it was just grand.
Oh, wow.
And Carol, the actress who played, because it was a 2-character play, and she played Pearl. And she said, "Oh, baby, look at you. You're happy, aren't you?" I said, yeah, it's a great party. She said, "You know who this party is for?" I said, "It's for the cast." She says, no, my dear. This party is for you. She says, "And if you did not know what you were doing, if you were not brilliant, you would not be celebrated. When you walk through that door, here's what they would have done. They would turn their backs and shun you." She said, "But you proved to them that you were special and unique." And she said, "So when you go back to America and you're looking for work, you remember this day and this atmosphere of support that is for you. And you remember that your gift has made way for you to sit in the presence of kings and queens." And I cried. And she said, "Yes, cry. Because you may never get the accolades you so richly deserve. But my dear, you are special, and you have proved it to the European audience of Vienna." And I never forgot this.
Not bad for a kid who's too dark.
Yes. I'm crying like a baby.
That's all right. I told you. I wanted you to tell your story, and sometimes it's exposed stuff you haven't thought about in years. But that's the point.
I haven't thought about this.
Our journeys are different. Each actor I talk to, each artist I talk to, their journeys are different. Their backgrounds are different, whether they were supported or not. But what I find is the common thread is that they have discovered about themselves over the course of the journeys, things that when they relive that experience, it opened them up. And the only way to do that is to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, my brother, who I adore, and he adores me. I was so happy when he won the Emmy Award. When he got Timbuktu, his first Broadway show, I was doing Caliban at La Mama, and I auditioned, but I didn't want to be in that show. I wanted to do Caliban with the great Tom O'Horgan. And, his star started to rise, and he said to me, he said, Wole, it doesn't matter if my name is known on a certain level. In my heart, you are always the biggest star. I adore you. He says, but don't equate your success with mine, because you are successful, and just continue on your journey.
Right. The value of the work that you're doing isn't in, I thought about this when I first met you. I had to do things together. I knew the name Oba Babatunde. I knew that I knew him as an actor. I'd recognize the face. I always remember thinking, boy, he's an older gentleman, but he's awful handsome. I remember seeing him on Friends. Yes, I remember seeing him on Friends as the choreographer. But when I met you, and I'd worked with you, and I spent time, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit, I realized how much I was watching in real time actors develop. I was watching them change. I was watching them transform. I watched them be combative, and sometimes I myself questioned and thought, what do you want me to, how do I get?
Yes, I remember.
But you release into that and you say, I trust this person's vision. I trust their guidance.
Yeah.
And then you find a way to almost lean into them. I'm going to let you mold me. I'm going to let you pull me along. And then once you get your legs under you, you start to feel yourself doing it based on the instruction that they've given you. And that's a really powerful experience. That's a powerful success to have.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're certainly, absolutely. So I'd like to, because you talked a little bit about your time at the Vienna English Theater. You mentioned you the first Black African-American director to direct Shakespeare Festival of Dallas. You're working at the York Theater in off-Broadway.
Oh, I love the York.
Yeah. In the meantime, you're also developing an interest in crafting your own stories and building your own material and what we should call, creating your own vehicles. And specifically, your first piece, a one-man show, Zigzag.
Yes.
You ended up taking that to Berlin.
Yeah, I developed it in Berlin. And my good friend, Siri Satnam, you may know him from the TV show called The Therapist. Okay. He is actually a choreographer. So he was a well-known choreographer over there at the time. And I went to Europe to find my fame and fortune. Okay. And because my godfather, Alfred Davis, who was another huge influence on my life as a support system, he was an astrologer and such a powerful spiritual man. He told me, he said, the star said you need to get out of New York. Your success is in Europe. So I went to Europe to work on Zigzag.
Right.
And which never happened. And to live with Siri, who still is one of my dear friends. But I came back because my mother, when I called to New York, she said, ain't nothing happening for you over there. You need to get your black ass back over here. And my father said, you stay over there as long as you want. And do you need anything? And I said, yeah, I want to come home. And he sent me $500 to come home on China Airway. And I came home. But I went because I thought my success, according to my godfather, would be somewhere else. But it was. It wasn't in New York, but it was in Dallas. Dallas has become my artistic home.
Right. And you built a network from that place. But in the meantime, that experience, Zigzag, leads you to a whole series of pieces, including the piece Blind Lemon.
Yes, it did.
Which is the piece you've been working on most recently. You've had a good deal of writes and rewrites and success, and come and bring the show to New York. So that was the beginning of that process.
Well, I met Dr. Alan Governor, who's become a family member. I met him because a good friend of ours who was the head of the Office of Cultural Affairs, a mover and shaker in the arts world, Margie Reese. And if you don't know who she is, you really do need to. And she said, Alan had a piece. And she said, the only person who could help your piece, if he gets interested in it, is Akin. And when he showed me a play called The Black Snake Moan, I was very candid. And I said, there's not a play here. And my assistant was with me, and I said, so I'm not interested. And he said, okay. So he must have looked up and saw who I was and things like that and my experience. He called me back for another meeting. And we're both Leos. And, you know, Leos have this kind of kingly-like attitude. And we became very close because I lost a friend when I was in junior high school, Eric Klein, because he was Jewish and I was Black, and they made us fight, and that was my best friend. And Alan became the Eric Klein that I lost. And so I started talking about the development of blind women, who I never knew of. Alan brought an understanding of the blues to me, my own culture, and started working from the perspective of how I work with this, which is what I learned at La Mama and other experiences like that. And we developed Blind Lemon, Prince of Country Blues, which had a 16-member cast. And then that morphed into Blind Lemon Blues, which had an off-Broadway production and several European tours. And then it morphed into a one-man show called Lonesome Blues. And they were all successful. And we had a great supporter in Jim at the York Theater, which has become another home for me. So I love that. And we're going to tour Lonesome Blues, but I'm not going to tour it. I'll tour it with an actor that I met and worked with in Abyssinia. His name is Jeremy Dantre, and I think he would be good in it. So I'm going to direct it at the Undermain next fall.
Well, wonderful. Well, I mean, there's so much, you know, in the midst of all that. You're teaching, you're doing artist in residencies, all this process as you say, looking for your success, which you're actually building day by day.
Yes.
You make your way into Dallas. You're working there. You're establishing this. This is going to be my home. This is where I'm going to build my base from.
Yes.
Why Dallas? I mean, I know why you came, but why stay?
Because oh my God, there was something. Dallas it was open. It felt like open space. And when I was a member of the Dallas Theatre Company under Adrian Hall and the actors who worked under that, I felt like I had found my home. And then when I was able to develop Vivid Theater Ensemble and provide opportunities for other people to work at the Dallas Theatre Center, like a well-known actress who was in Roscoe, Welcome Home, Roscoe Lee Brown. She's a person I met. Her name is Liz Michaels. She's getting ready to do a Broadway show called 1776 with all the different, with a female cast. So Tosha Story, who is on the Oval, she plays the mother in Oval on Oval. These were all, they considered me their mentor, and they were in my company. And that was supported under the Dallas Theatre Center. So Dallas literally is a place I can breathe. It seems like I can get art done much more accessibly. And we all find our home. This has become an artistic home. I don't know where my life is going to take me. Maybe I will end up in Rome or Europe, like my godfather said. But for now, I've been here for almost 3 decades, and I feel like I can breathe here.
Well, I was curious because you part of obviously a rich culture that's happening in Dallas, but your worldview is much broader, and yet you've decided, I'm going to make art here. I'm going to make art, and I mean, you've done television, you've done film. I think that's an important story to tell, because so often I hear young actors say, my success is this. It's doing a movie. It's doing a film. It's living in New York. And yet you've got this career that I can't even encapsulate in an hour.
Oh.
And I want them to see that. I want them to know your success is what you want it to be. How you make the biggest contribution to the thing you're passionate about. Your art is alive in Dallas.
Yes.
Not only that, but it branches out all over the country, including, and this is where I'll to segue into this. You decide to take a directing gig for a artistic director that you've never met, who is also going to audition for the play at a little theater company called the Pollard in Guthrie, Oklahoma. And they're doing fences. Tell me, I gotta ask now that we've had some time removed from it. So tell me about your process to get to that and how you ended up doing it.
I'm going to be very frank and honest with you. I was fascinated. I was fascinated and beyond fascinated, proud that there was an African-American artistic director in Oklahoma. And somebody had told me, you need to meet Jerome. And I said, okay, who's Jerome? And they said, oh, he's an artistic director. Oh, that's nice. And he's African-American. I said, what are you talking about? An African-American artistic director who does all of these musicals and transcends color. And I came to see a play. I I ended up directing that play, The Mountaintop.
Okay.
And that's where I first met you, and Janine was in that play. Yeah. And we had a nice discussion. You said, yeah, you got to come work here at some point. I said, okay. And you know how that goes,
Sure.
But then you called, and I said, I am so honored to do that. So I was honored because of who and what you represent. Mm-hmm. And then when I got to direct fences and all, it was beautiful. And it was kind of disturbing for people because they hadn't worked that way before.
Sure.
And there was some pushback, and people thought I was a little tough, which I was.
Sure.
Because if I didn't believe something, even with you,
yes.
I'd say I didn't believe what you were saying. And you said, I'm saying, I don't believe it. Now, that's okay.
Yeah.
But you follow my direction. We never got into a thing, but it was different.
Yeah.
And I absolutely was floored and beyond proud of when that production went up, because I knew where everybody started from. It was flawless. Flawless. My experience there was nothing less than superb. Even the pushback. And I want to come back at some point.
Oh, you trust me. If I have anything to say about it, you definitely will. I have to tell you a story.
Okay.
So we did the play. I had several friends come and see it. You know how that works. You get friends that come and everybody's did a good job and the play was really good. And I said, yeah, I was really happy. And then I got a couple of people who said, hey, you got a chance to work with Akin. How was that? And I said, it was electric. It was constantly moving. It was constantly live and fluid. He had a vision, and there was a process to learn to understand what that vision was. And there was a process to be able to say, because ultimately what I think had to happen in that show is we had to say, I'm not already there. And that's why he's here. And each actor found it in their own time. And some people took longer and some people it was quicker. But the story I'll tell you is that I went and saw this after the show. A couple of friends of mine came and saw it. One of them is a really gifted musician and singer. I've been in several plays with him, but he's a pretty fun-loving, good-natured guy. But he's about my age, and he can't talk. He can't speak. He is sobbing, so emotional, having seen the play. And he says to me, that man, he's trying to communicate. Troy is just doing the best he can. And he's saying, I know what that feels like. I know how afraid you can be that you're going to make mistakes and screw up the raising of your kid. And all of this through tears and through trying to speak over sobs. And I thought, Well, if there was ever proof that was the right director to bring him to do the show, this is it.
Oh,
this moment is it. It was an extraordinary experience, and I'm so glad that you did it, and I'm so glad that we had that opportunity, and I hope that we have it again soon when all this is over.
Yes, I do too.
So I have to ask you this, because you started with this, with Get Back, and with your experience with Carousel. Why, Akin, does representation matter?
Because it's identification, and therefore, when you identify with the possibility of what can be, it makes it all. Well, it doesn't make it all worthwhile. It's always all worthwhile if you're doing the work. You got to constantly do the work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's what I tell young actors. It's not about the glory. Somebody told you were good and you believed them. Well, too bad. You're only as good as your last performance. Right. And I realized that when I played Mr. M in My Children, My Africa, and a wonderful director, Clinton Turner Davis, out of New York, a friend of mine, directed. And he was on my ass like white on rice. He said, you sound West Indian rather than South African. And you're so worried about the glory of the reviews rather than the work itself. And by that time, I had become a celebrated artist in Dallas, and I was. And he broke me down. And one day in rehearsal, I was twiddling my fingers like this, and he said, there's Mr. M. Oh my God, that's Mr. M. And when he said that, it was like I got out of the way and the character came in. And that's the problem. We have ego. We have trying to be perfect rather than progression. Mm-hmm. And so when we identify with an artist who is like ourselves, and they are comfortable in their skin and in their art, that just gives us the entree to soar. And I that's why when you were the artistic director as an African American, I identified with that. And I wanted to do the best work because I knew how wonderful you were and the reputation you had, but I also knew how hard it was. Right. And I think that's very essential. I think it's essential to do the work. Never stop doing the work.
It's a funny thing. I've had a couple of these interviews, and I try to rack my brain. I've had the pleasure of working with you. I've had the pleasure of working with Al Bostic.
Yes.
I've had the pleasure of working with a gentleman named Tyrone Wilkerson. Though you three, unless I'm very much mistaken, are the only three African American directors I've never worked with. I've come into contact with probably just about the same handful of African American actors of note, Earl Hyman being one of them, who I talked to and said, have you encountered many men that look like us that direct? And he kind of, in his own special way was trying to count it on his hands and couldn't get past, a handful of people. And I thought, I've never seen that. So it never occurred to me that I could do it.
Yeah.
Even as a young actor, I hadn't seen many African-American actors and gone, oh, I think I can do that. I think I can be on the stage because they're there.
Yeah.
So that identification is a big part of the story that you're telling in your life.
It's real.
You're a superhero because I got to see you do it. I got to see in books about the Negro Ensemble Theater. I got to see in documentation about what the National Black Theater in Harlem was. Obviously, I'm not a New Yorker, but I got to see, hey, somebody else has done this. Look at Mary Alice here. Look at Ossie Davis. Yeah. So, yeah, I think, clarifying for folks, and I think it's whatever you are. I think wherever you fall, you want to
Yes.
identify and see yourself.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is the advice that Akin Babatundé at this point in his life has for the successor? This person's seen old microfilm or seen stories about the theater in Harlem and says, I think I can do that. What's the advice that you give to that successor? Because somebody is looking at you and going, that's what I really want my journey to look like. I have no idea how you do it.
Well, you have to be prepared. You have to have a foundation of knowing your craft. And you have to study. You have to study, consistently study, and work on your craft. You know, my assistant director is a powerhouse. You know, I talked about Tosha Story in the Oval, and a lot of plays I do. She didn't come with me here. She was doing a movie, but she is my assistant director. She's like my successor. You know, she's the little things that I don't do. When she came up under me, she said, "Oh, you become soft in your old age. You would have never let me get away with that." But why are they saying that moment? You just let it get away. Why is that? And I laugh and I say, you know what? She's right, because it's about consistently doing the work. And not doing the work for the success of it, but doing the work because the work is part of who you are. And therefore, the success will come. But you got to be prepared.
Right.
You've got to be prepared. And it doesn't matter if you're in New York or wherever, as long as you're good at your craft and the work is done.
Yeah.
You know, I have so many, you know, Ackwood Watson played Aaron Burr in Hamilton, the Chicago company. And I worked with him as a young actor in Gem of the Ocean. And I was on his ass like white on rice. And to see that kind of success is just overwhelming. You know, I had another young actor who for years was very close to me, Walter Fauntleroy, who was in the Oval as well. And to see those kind of successes, it's like part of me, you know, being, they're like part of what they have received from me. And Liz Michael, the names go on. And so it's not about where you are, but it is about you being an artist. And being an artist, sometimes it's not an easy road. But if you say that's what you are, then by God, you embrace it and you go on that fabulous journey. Because that fabulous journey supports you spiritually, mentally, and on all levels that I cannot even explain.
Oh. Yeah, your superhero.
I appreciate it.
Your your power is your legacy, my friend.
Thank you.
All of the places that you have allowed somebody to know there's room up here for you.
Yeah.
Little black boy, little black girl, little artist of whatever color, but particularly those of us who see you and go, the hand up there, the hand that's reaching out and giving me a leg up is attached to that dark face.
Yes, yes.
Like,
right.
Bring me on up, brother, because I too have one of those faces, and I was glad to look up into the eyes of someone who had a face like mine and said, hey, I can bring you up here if you're ready to do the work. I'm grateful. So I always like to end these with the fabulous Bouillon de Culture questionnaire. And so I've got these 10 questions for you. What is your favorite word?
Magnificent.
That sounds like you. What is your least favorite word?
Nigga.
Yeah. Mine too. What turns you on creatively, spiritually, emotionally?
the having an idea and then seeing that idea come into fruition, you're like a vessel. So sometimes I'll have a kernel of an idea, like when I directed Mountaintop, I saw it in black and white. And then to see that come along, and only the red I only saw was in his tie. And to see that come along, it's almost as if the heavens are saying, here's the picture. You be the vessel and bring it to life. That turns me on.
Yes. Love that. What turns you off?
Lazy naysayers. People who don't want to do the work, but think they've arrived.
Right.
Pretenders to the crown, baby. That turns me.
Love it. I'm almost afraid to ask. What's your favorite curse word?
Motherfucker. I'm saying that. I'm sorry.
No, I love it. I love it. What sound or noise do you love?
Chimes.
Okay.
Sound of chimes.
What sound or noise do you hate?
The chalk on a blackboard.
I get that completely. Akin, what profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Well, I started off as a fashion designer, but I think I've moved past that. So a profession other than my own, I think a fashion designer.
Yeah. You still like to try to craft and build. Yeah. As long as you get the next right, you'll probably be fine this time.
Yes, that's right.
What profession would you not like to try?
And no offense to, but a politician. It's cutthroat.
And finally, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
My child, what took you so long? We've been waiting for your glorious self.
Yes, love that.
That's what I would like to hear him say.
Well, take your time getting there.
Okay, I will.
Keep making fabulous art. Keep making people around you magnificent.
Okay.
You are loved, brother. You are respected. I thank you so much.
I so appreciate this.
It happened. It happened to me. I was transformed, and I'm not alone.
I am Akin Babatundé. I am an artist, and I am plugged in.